I am Elizabeth Frazier. I'm a partner at Pierce Atwood here in Portland, Maine, and I have the pleasure of serving as MEREDA's policy counsel. I work in Augusta as well as locally in our communities. And I want to, very briefly, I'm going to introduce our co-chairs of the Public Policy Committee in just a second, but I wanted to this year remind us of our guiding principle, and this is the Public Policies Committee's guiding principle. We seek a more fair, practical, and predictable landscape for real estate development in Maine. And that's going to be important in a few minutes, and you'll see why. So I am very lucky to work with Jason Howe and Tyler Norrod. Jason is actually, he is the chair of the real estate group at Freddie Flaherty, as well as a partner there. And Tyler is the director of development at the Westbrook Development Corporation, and they both serve as the co-chairs of our Public Policy Committee, providing excellent guidance on politics, policy, nuance, being there for me when I want to rip my hair out, and giving me options on where to go next. So I very much appreciate their guidance, and the Public Policy Committee has continued to be really, really important up in Augusta as well as locally, in part due to their leadership. So he asked why about wiping off the remote, and I said, you don't need to. That's because I spent all of my time at the legislature with hundreds of people up in Augusta, and sometimes it's a little bit messy. Sometimes it's good. We did have some victories in the 132nd legislature. That's the legislature we're in now. So just to level set for everyone, we're currently in the 132nd. It started last year. It did most of the big work last year. It had a long session. It runs from January to late June. This year is the second session. It runs from January to about mid-April. So it's much shorter. There's a lot less work done. That's because this is an election year. I don't know, you might have heard something about that. So they try to finish early, in part so that they can raise money, but also so that they can go out on the road and campaign. But there's a lot going on in the 132nd on housing. And when I was here last year, you may recall I had a page at the end of my slide that was bills, lists of bills, like 18 miles deep. They've worked through a lot of those. In fact, they've worked through almost all of them. So 1 year later, I get to stand here before you and talk about the 200 to 300 bills that they dealt with in just housing alone. There are also bills in energy and environment, which are incredibly impactful to the work that we all do here, as well as licensing matters, which a lot of you care about, and business matters. So some of you may know about paid family medical leave. That's just an example of some of the major things that they do up in the legislature. All of that has gone on in the last year, so it's been crazy. But there's some really good news to share about housing, and I want to talk about it. So 3 areas that sort of, I think, were the most robust in terms of victory and making changes in policy are impact fees, parking mandates, and land use. And I want to talk a little bit about each of those. So here are sort of the 4: LD 1498, LD 437, LDs 128, 435, and 1755. I'm going to talk about that again in a second. That's exciting stuff around the historic tax credit. And LD 1829, which is probably the biggest one that will take up the most of my time here this morning. So LD 1498, I'm going to tell you all a little story because I think it sort of illustrates how things are in Augusta and how sometimes you just get lucky, and this was one of those times. So we did not put this bill in. I actually think this might have been sort of originally pushed by the Maine State Chamber. I don't know if Patrick is in the room. I think he might be, which was great to sort of get the Housing Committee to look at the role of impact fees, what they are, whether or not they should have guardrails on them, et cetera. So the bill came out, and I read it, and I thought, this is pretty good, but it doesn't really have much detail. It was kind of a concept draft. And I went looking to write my testimony for an example. I was looking for a particularly egregious example of impact fee use. And I won't say the town, because they might be here. But I found one. It was just a news article from like 10 years ago, actually, that talked about this athletic facility that had been built using impact fees that were directly from housing creation and development. And it was a significant amount of money, and they built the athletic facility, and it's great, and the community loves it, and all that's fine. And I threw it in my testimony. I don't even think I could testify in person for this bill. I think I was somewhere else that day. And lo and behold, the media picks it up, and this thing starts taking off. And the legislature did something it never does. It went totally aggressive on policy, and passed this bill that if there are municipalities in the room, they're going to know because they don't like it. The impact fees have to be returned within 365 days of initial payment, and that they have to be significantly related. And in fact, the town has to prove that they're related and required for the project. So it happened fast, and it was a big change. I don't know if maybe eventually, it might get rolled back. There might be some changes to that depending on how municipalities feel, their needs arise. But this was new law. It took effect early last fall. So it's important for you all to know about, because if you're working in towns and you're hearing about impact fees, you do have a law to fall back on that you can challenge them on. So that is very new, exciting stuff. LD 437, this limited parking mandates. So this now says that a town cannot require more than one parking space per unit in a growth area. So growth areas, for those of you who aren't familiar, are identified in the comprehensive plan. Town has to do a comprehensive plan every 10 years. As part of that, they have to identify a growth area. There are no guardrails around what a growth area is right now. So if you're like, oh, what does that look like? Whatever the town says it looks like. But most towns have them. And so in that town, you would be able to do a one space per unit. And of course, the town can have a lower requirement if they wish to, or no requirement. It also set the precedent that developers can satisfy their parking requirements through off-site arrangements within 1/4 of a mile. So some of you may have heard of this in other cities. I don't know how much uptake there's been in Maine, but I think there will be more now that it's clearly legal. This is the kind of thing where you might have a multifamily and 200 feet away there's a parking garage, right? And so you can make a deal with that parking garage to satisfy your parking needs. That will satisfy the town's parking requirements under the new law. So I think that's really good. There possibly might be some changes coming to it, but we're going to try to hold them back. So for now, that is the rule across the state. Okay, so the Maine Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit. Last year was a big year for the historic tax credit. We added an accelerated credit accrual for major projects. So if you're in the major projects category, you can basically take all of your cash accrual in the first year now. That is really helpful to get cash infused into projects earlier. It also helps prevent the need for phasing for no particular reason other than simply phasing out the credit over the period of years in which you receive it. So that was a nice update to the historic tax credit law. Another was the addition of a rural housing booster. So it's 10%, and it does stack with the affordable housing booster. So if you are in a rural area, you now get your base credit, and it's like 25%, I think. An extra 10% for affordable if you're doing affordable, and an extra 10% for rural if you're rural. That's 45% credit for the rehabilitation of a historic building in Maine. Really exciting stuff. There are 3 more things we'd really like to do this year, and this bill was passed out of the Taxation Committee, so as a matter of policy, the legislature has already said, yes, we like it. It's been adopted by the House and the Senate, but it is awaiting its funding approval. It's LD 435, and it would add a homeowner credit. So currently, in the historic tax credit program, the property must be income producing. This would essentially allow for non-income producing properties, including homes. There is an income cap. I can't recall it off the top of my head. I want to say it's maybe 120% of AMI or something like that, to ensure that it's going to people who need it and couldn't rehab their home, with money that they have. So that's exciting, as well as the small project cap. So increasing the small project cap up to $1 million. It's currently $250,000. You can't do anything for $250,000. Anything. And we got lucky, actually, because the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability, OPEGA, did a big report on the historic tax credit about 2 years ago. And they actually identified that the small project cap was too low and that people weren't taking it up. People weren't using it. It just wasn't being taken advantage of, which is too bad because major projects obviously are taken advantage of all the time. We've seen significant rehabilitation in a lot of our downtowns, especially our mill towns. Actually, that picture there in the frame is the Skowhegan. I don't know if our friends are here from Green Mars, not from Green Mars. But that's the spinning mill in Skowhegan that was recently just completely redone over. I was there a few years ago when it was still in its original shape, and it was quite something to see. It was falling apart. And that's what it looks like today. That was done on historic tax credit money, and the folks that did that actually helped get the rural booster added for projects going forward. So really exciting opportunities for funding for projects. The last thing, of course, is one that we've been after for a long time. If you've been around MEREDA and you've been in Public Policy Committee or you've heard me up here before, we're always trying to get rid of the sunset on the historic tax credit program. And that's because it is so successful. It's been proven over and over again. The OPEGA report showed that, gave the data to back that up. But also because we know that there's a long pipeline, right? There's a long pipeline, and we don't want people to not take up these projects because it looks like it might expire in 2030. And this is my 4th time in the 11 years that I've been doing this, back at the State House extending the sunset. So I don't think there are any legislators in the room because it's a legislative session day. But I have to say that while I appreciate the continued work and business, I would be much more happy to just eliminate the sunset so there is certainty and predictability for developers. So that's something we'll be working on. Even if we can't get those other 2 pieces in, we'll be shooting for that. And I did add a little note there to please reach out to support LD 435 to help us check those last 3 boxes and make this the most, I would say, the most robust historic tax credit program in the nation. I don't know if Tara's here, but she could probably back me up on that. So, okay, now we're at the big one, LD 1829, land use density incentives. You can see them. I'm not going to go through them. I'll tell you why. I wish I had him on a mic right now. This is an interesting bill. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. For sake of understanding, I'm going to call it LD 2003 2.0. So many of you, hopefully all of you, know LD 2003. It was a big bill a few years ago. It did a lot of things with land use density. Sort of the big ones that you might know about are eliminating single-family zoning, allowing for an ADU to be built as of right, a handful of other things. That's been in the books for a couple of years. Last year, the Housing Committee passed LD 1829, which takes that a little bit further. It cleaned up some things in LD 2003 with respect to how units might be arranged on a property. You know, it clarifies whether or not they all have to be in one building. Can the ADU be separate? That kind of thing. But it also provided a lot of incentive in growth areas. So you heard me talk about growth areas a few minutes ago. They're incredibly impactful. They started in LD 2003, becoming a factor. As of 1829, they are the factor in development in Maine. If you are developing in Maine, seek a growth area. I cannot emphasize that enough. The incentives are huge, and they're not anywhere else. So if you can find it, find a property in the growth area in your town. One of the things they allowed was 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, elimination of growth caps in growth areas, increased height allowance for affordable housing. I think that's also in growth areas, but that could be anywhere. I'd have to double check. And then a big one, up to 4 units on a lot before municipal subdivision review. We tried to get up to 4 lots. We were not successful. They are going to study the issue of municipal subdivision review this summer. The Maine Office of Community Affairs, MOCA, Samantha Horn, is the executive director there, is going to pull together interested parties to look at municipal subdivision and what changes might be made to streamline it. I think they will also look at the question of lot division. And in case you're wondering what the opposition is, and it was quite substantial, it primarily comes from the environmental community. So that's what we're looking at there. The reason I didn't want to go through all of these in too much detail is because I want to talk about LD 2173, which they're actually taking up at the legislature today at the Housing Committee for a work session. This bill is in response to community pushback to LD 1829, which was significant, rapid, and somewhat aggressive. And I don't mean that in a negative term. I just mean it in the sense that legislators really took notice of it. It happened very quickly. The Speaker of the House went to the town of Scarborough a few weeks ago to talk to them about their concerns. Town of Scarborough, Wyndham, I think Westbrook, and a few others sent a letter to the legislature stating their concerns with this bill. And they have a couple of concerns. One is impingement on local control, and obviously that's been the case with LD 2003 as well as LD 1829. There are also concerns about infrastructure, right? The ability to grow infrastructure and have infrastructure for projects. And I would say also a general growing concern from community leaders that there is an increase in the amount of statewide legislation addressing land use. I will not hide from you that I think it's a good thing, but not everybody does, and that's okay. And our community leaders are really coming out right now to share their concerns with statewide land use policies. So LD 2173 has been submitted, it's been printed. It contains some changes. For example, would change the look back on growth caps, so it wouldn't eliminate them, but it would require them to have a somewhat more recent look back than they often do. Would make some changes to the height allowance, et cetera. I don't know how much further it will go. That's the open question today, because there's so much pressure on the legislature and on the Democrats who have been really good on housing. There's so much pressure on them that they are backtracking, that they are nervous about taking aggressive action. And I'm going to talk about what we're going to do about that in a minute, but I want to really put a marker in the sand on that. So we don't know what LD 2173 is going to look like. It's entirely possible there'll be two versions. One, which is very, more local control, sort of municipal control forward, and one that's more statewide land use policy, minor revisions to LD 1829 forward. And what that will look like between the House and the Senate, I couldn't begin to predict, so you'll have to tune in sometime in April to find out. But that's all happening right now. Okay, and so I've sort of given you the outlook. Now I get to give you the story. A word about LD 1926. This was MEREDA's missing middle solution. The dead is a little bit of a joke, but it's not really. That's actually, if you go to the legislative website and you type in LD 1926, you will see it actually says dead in parentheses. So I thought it would be fun for you all to kind of see that. Just as a very quick reminder, that table there sort of shows you what was proposed in LD 1926. It was an infill density proposal for individuals earning incomes between 80% and 220% of AMI. Alternatively, you could have a smaller minimum lot size, depending on whether or not one was more beneficial to your project or the other. The idea was that it was a market of scale solution to help projects pencil. It was a no-cost solution for the state. Oh, and a big thank you to our sponsor, Representative Holly Stover. I know she's not here today. She was fantastic working with us on this. And she fought for us until the very last second when it became clear that there was no path forward for any more statewide land use changes, not just our bill. And that all happened in the last month. And this is a pretty significant change up in the legislature. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how to respond to it. But there's really good news. And the good news is our leaders at MEREDA, including Shannon, who I give a big shout out to, a few months ago, or almost a year ago now, I guess, got together with some of our partners. You heard Shelley talk about this right at the beginning. This is the Build Homes Initiative. And we actually started out on this initiative with our partners, the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition, the Maine State Chamber, and the Portland Regional Chamber, in an effort to combat the NIMBY problem that we were seeing in our localities, right? So this was more the average everyday person turning out to our town officials and saying, we don't want this project, we don't like this project. Town officials, of course, feel pressured, they want to get reelected. We got to give them some cover, right? That was sort of the initial brainchild of Build Homes. And it will do that work. Over the next few months, Build Homes, you'll start to see some media coming out of Build Homes. We're going to run ads. We've already had a few press releases. We are working collectively to pass legislation that is really impactful, including, sort of pushing back on 2173, some of the other things that I've talked about today. But I'm going to hover for a minute on this slide. Or do I have another slide? Hang on. I might actually just, yes, sorry about that. Go back. Please do go ahead and scan this. This is the same QR code that Shelley had up earlier today about Build Homes. But here's why Build Homes is even more important now than it was before. Maine has about 1.4 million people in the state, so that means we have about 1.4 million NIMBYs. So we really need Build Homes to get in there and talk to people where they live or where they don't live, perhaps reminding them of the cost of housing and turning people out in their communities to support housing. But now, build homes is critical. And that is because we've lost our support at the State House. And that's not because legislators don't care about housing. Again, they do. A lot of them were willing to take pretty bold action. They passed a lot of our bills in the last few years. They passed LD 1829, LD 2003. But they're worried now, right? They're going into an election year. They're hearing from their community leaders that this isn't what their communities want. And they're hearing it in a loud voice. It's not just 2 or 3 people. It's the whole town councils in some cases. And they were hearing that for a long time from our rural communities. And I think there was a dismissal because rural communities have less resources, and so it sort of made sense. Now that they're hearing it from our more resourced communities, they're just worried that their, frankly, jobs are on the line at the end of the day, and that they could lose their seats if they continue to support statewide land use changes. So, Built Homes is going to be really helpful to not only overcome the NIMBY problem, but to get the message about housing creation as a rising tide that lifts all boats across Maine out there into all of our communities, and provide that cover also for our statewide elected officials, because they want to do the right thing. They want to pass laws that are going to help streamline things, but they're hearing so much pushback in their communities. And I suspect that in the room today are some of our community leaders who have struggled to adopt the policies coming out of the state. And that's fair, because they often don't come with monetary resources. The state eliminated the State Planning Office in 2010. We got a new one, State Planning 2.0. That's the Maine Office of Community Affairs that I mentioned. Again, I don't know if Samantha Horn's in the room, but shout out to that organization for the great work they're doing. So a lot of that came online late. You know, our communities were sort of stuck holding the bag, trying to figure out what to do. MOCA's now there, but the whole thing is really reaching ahead in Augusta. And so if you have a few moments of time, not today, but sometime in the next few days, this is my call to action for all of you. Please call or email your representative and senator. I put a little picture there. This isn't hard. Google who is my legislator. This is what will come up. And you can click on the first one, which is your House member, and the second one, which is your senator. I am going to tell you that if you click on the House member one, you're going to have to look for Alpha Town listing. For some reason, that's where the alphabetical towns are. Find your town, it'll give you your legislator. Senate's much easier because there's only 35 of them, so you can do that very quickly. The message is very simple. Mainers need attainable housing. This is a statewide issue. It needs statewide solutions. Support statewide land use solutions. And the more of you that can make this phone call or email, the greater the impact in Augusta. And honestly, I think it's Jeff Levine, I don't know if he's here today, he has a saying that 10 proponents is worth every 1 opponent. And he uses that in context of local land use, right? So if you're getting people out, if you can get out 1 proponent, it's worth 10 no voices in the room. And the same is true in Augusta. And people don't hear from their legislators don't hear from their constituents enough about things they're doing that are good. They only hear about the work they're doing that's bad. And that's human nature, because we're all very busy and we probably don't have the time to speak out unless we're really upset about something. So get upset about the fact that there's so many good policy solutions out there that aren't being implemented because of the political risk. And share with your elected officials that you support housing, that you support statewide solutions, maybe that you support funding for your communities. If you're a community leader in the room today, I highly recommend you to encourage them to support bonding for infrastructure and other things. But let them know that you do care and you want them to keep working on this issue in a progressive way so that Mainers can have attainable housing. And that is my call to action today. I usually don't do that, but it's been an interesting session and we've had a lot of change. And given that it is an election year, and I want to just sort of close out on the election year stuff because that's what everyone cares about anyway. Given that it is an election year, this is a really important time to get out in front of legislators now who are serving obviously in the 132nd, but also ones who are going to be coming into the legislature. I think we're looking at about 40% turnover in the legislature this year, which is huge. It's large every year, but 40% is substantial. That's a lot of re-education that we have to do. So if you can get in their ears now and say, hey, I really support X, Y, and Z, and I back you up on that, they're going to go into the State House knowing that they have your support, and that's really important to them. And I didn't actually put up an election slide because that would have forced me to put predictions and names and all kinds of things I didn't want to list. So I'll just very quickly share with you a few things about the election that I think are important that inquiring minds want to know. So obviously it's a big election year here in Maine, probably the biggest one. In fact, I was somewhere recently and they said people in our job, lobbyists, get maybe 2 or 3 of these in our careers. It's that big an election year cycle in the state of Maine, and that just has to do with timing more than anything. We have a gubernatorial election, we have a senatorial election, and we have all the members of the House and Senate up for re-election, and we have our 1st and 2nd district representatives up for re-election. And in the 2nd district, of course, Jared Golden has announced he's not running again. So that seat is essentially open, which is, a change from where everybody thought we were going to be a few months ago. Everybody's running for governor, so stay tuned on that one. If you missed it and you're looking for fun, I haven't actually watched it yet, but last night there was a fun little debate between Troy Jackson and Bobby Charles that was streamed live online, so I encourage you to check that out. And of course, the Senate race, you all know about. The governor's running in it. It's Susan Collins' seat. So that's going to be, a big thing, both in the primary for Democrats in June and then heading into the fall. And we will get a lot of change over the next year up in Augusta as a new gubernatorial administration comes in, all new department heads, all new commissioners, maybe all new policy. And we don't know whether or not the House and Senate chambers will flip, but they've certainly gotten a lot closer over the last few years. So I stand here today because I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to say to you in here next year. I hope it's good news. I'm really hoping that I can come before you all and say that thanks to all of you and all the calls you made, that we have revived statewide land use change efforts in Augusta, and that through Build Homes, we're going to start to see a sea change in our communities in the way that people respond to housing developments in their town. And with that, I'm going to close with a big thank you to Bev Uhlenhake. I don't know if she's in the room right now, but she is my partner in crime up in Augusta at Pierce Atwood, and she's manning the Build Homes table downstairs, so if you have a chance, please stop by that today. And just, of course, to thank MEREDA for its continued letting me do this work up in Augusta for them. I enjoy it. I greatly enjoy being the voice for all of you, and I'll be here all day, happy to talk to any of you about our legislative initiatives, what the politics are, what you want to see MEREDA doing in Augusta, anything that's on your mind.